Story 1. After I realized I was on the other side, my fear subsided a little. I realized I had made a painless transition because you no longer feel the weight or trappings of your body. I was in total darkness that had put my panic into overdrive. As I slowly began to acclimatize myself to my surroundings, I could feel evil slithering and crawling in the darkness all around me. I had only one thought going on inside me, that being that they are looking for me. I was terrified and started searching for the light I thought was supposed to be here. I moved around as slowly and silently as possible. I noticed it was lighter in one direction and started to move that way when I felt extreme aggression emanating from the right of me. Fearful of moving towards the light and drawing attention to myself, I instead withdrew into the darker shadow and stayed still. As I lay there listening to the scuttling and scurrying of all the evil feelings in the darkness around me, I tried to figure out what to do next. I knew if I moved, from the amount of activity that was going on around me, that I would be discovered. I was at my wit's end when I said, "God help me." Instantly, everything around me went scurrying off in every direction, and that was when I felt it. A strong feeling of perfect love and trust. The closer it came, the stronger the feeling became, until this immense feeling totally engulfed me in ecstasy so intense as to be unimaginable. It lifted me by my elbows above the darkness, and away we went. Me supported by two beings that felt better than a mother's breast to a newborn. I looked up at my benefactors and found that they were dressed in black gowns. They had a screen over their faces that, if you looked closely, had a mirror-like substance that reflected your own image back at you. They were giving me reassurances through feelings and music that was like talking, only better than language. There is nothing to learn. You can understand totally and clearly. They stopped suddenly as something I couldn't recognize appeared. It seemed that when I looked past them, everything was out of focus. One of them opened up what looked like a giant tobacco sack. It was made of suede leather and so soft. As she opened it, we all went inside and the sack closed over us. They then told me an immense amount of information in a gleaming. The gist of which is that this was my world and I controlled it and everything in it. I could bring anything I wanted into my world with no limits. It was mine to do with as I wished. The only rule was that if I removed something, it could never come back. They then instructed me to picture in my mind a place where I felt safe. I did, and it took shape right before my eyes. They then asked me if anything was wrong, and I saw a couple of things that were. The things instantly transformed, sort of like Mercury rearranging until they were perfect. Then the beings left. I started to explore my new world from the comfort of my oversized recliner and was enjoying the relaxing time. Suddenly, the beings reappeared and told me I had to go back to the other world for a while. I voiced my objections, but they firmly lifted me out of the pod and away we went. I looked around as we were leaving, as they said it was permitted of residents. I am unable to describe what I saw for lack of language to describe it. I wanted for a time after I got back to paint it, but lacked the talent to do so. Anyway, I was taken to a place where I could see my body through a black veil. I was then shoved feet first through the top of my head back into my body. When I opened my eyes, I was inside my body. It was in pain, and the doctor and a nurse were asking me if I knew where I was. The doctor told me that I may have some broken ribs and a dislocated shoulder, among other things. Also that I was on a balloon pump, and it looked like I was going to recover some of my memories and functions damaged by oxygen deprivation. I looked down at my chest, and it was discolored and swollen to resemble a football under the skin on the right side of my chest. I was uncomfortable, to say the least. I tried to move my right arm and heard this awful loud scream. I looked around and I was back behind the veil. Love and Truth were there, and they asked why I was back so soon. Then they laid what looked like a chrome flashlight on my chest. It played a colorful tone and my chest went down. They asked if there was anything else I would like other than returning to my pod, as I like to call it. I said no, and they told me it would be there waiting for me. Then I came back to the hospital bed. This story was shared by James S. and happened in 1995.
Story 2. I experienced a sort of light sleep culminating with a sensation of breaking into a million particles. I could sense that my body was still on the bed, and I was sort of above it, but only just. It was a sensation of separation from the physical body, but still being fully aware of my essence. During this stage, my aura, as I will call it, was intermingling with a friend who was asleep next to me on my bed. I was communicating with the aura of my friend who was beside me. It was like our auras were a culmination of all our many lives and experiences since being on Earth, and the beginning of time from the caveman days to now. I could tell which gene pool he stemmed from and also my own. As my friend was only sleeping, I took this as a sort of force field that we all have, something that we all are connecting with amongst each other even if we don't realize it. I was then flown around the world at a great speed. It was pulling me around by my solar plexus region. I had no body at this stage, but I was still a soul. When my journey around the Earth had reached above Indonesia, as I was flying around the equator, it was sort of like looking at a Google Earth map. I was sucked into a tunnel. It didn't have sides, so to speak, just a feeling that I was being drawn up to the next level. I was greeted by a light being, although I don't remember flying into an actual light. I knew this soul and was guided around the place. I was shown rooms and doorways, mostly which contained other souls. They were learning things and preparing for their return to Earth or wherever their next journey was to be. I also saw souls who I would call angels or higher beings. They were helping Earthlings with many problems, even medical discoveries. I was taken to many different levels by this friend and learned that anything is possible in this place. I can't remember most of the levels, as each one seemed more complex than the last. But I do remember the lower levels. I think there may be about 7 or more. I was taken before God, who was just as I imagined. A bright light being so brilliant like I've never seen. Yet we had met before with a human form approximately 8 feet tall and made from pure love and light. We communicated telepathically, and every question I had was answered, although I don't remember exactly what I asked. I was shown a movie of my life from start until then. It was so fast and yet so precise. I was asked if I would change anything, to which I answered, yes, of course. He also asked me other questions, like if I was happy with my life. I replied that I was. I was left with a feeling inside as to how much good I'd given and how much bad I'd given. I was told this would be the feeling I'd be left with whilst there. My feeling was not bad. It was not extremely great either. It was a slightly nervous feeling, but one that I could be satisfied with. I'm imagining that if you were mean and awful throughout your life, that you would be left with a bad feeling while transitioning to the next place. This place was so wonderful and sort of felt like home. Most people could never imagine it nor want to leave, but I asked if I could go back to Earth. God asked me why, and I told him that my kids were asleep in the next room, that I would never forgive myself if they had to wake in the morning and find their mom dead. The previous year, their father had passed by his own choice. If they had to grow up without parents, then they would think no one loved them enough to stay. That was so far from the truth. My every particle was aching with this thought. I was allowed to come back. There was no begging or pleading. Perhaps it seemed an unselfish act, and so it was granted. I'm so thankful for that. I was told that if I was to come back, I would have to forget what I had learned on the other side, as it would interfere with my life. I was sent back so quickly through the soles of my feet and awoke a few hours later. This story was shared by Linda G. and happened in 1999.